With that, it is my pleasure to welcome back Rabbi Noah Farkas to talk with us about Jewish life in the next 50 years. Most of us know Noah, who served as a rabbi here at VBS from 2008 to 2021. He is now the Chief Executive Officer and President of the Federation of Los Angeles. And just a couple other colorful bits of background. He did serve in Biloxi, Mississippi as a rabbi, where he helped rebuild the Gulf Coast Jewish community after Hurricane Katrina, and also was involved as an appointed commissioner and former chair of the Los Angeles Homelessness Services Authority for a 2-year campaign where he helped mobilize churches, synagogues, and other organizations to pass historic legislation that has invested over $5 billion into housing and services for the vulnerable in LA. I also want to mention that he served as a U.S. Navy Reserve chaplain and as a third-generation veteran. And with that, Noah, I'm so glad to welcome you back and interested to hear your topic.
Good morning, everyone. Nice to see folks that I've known for decades, and nice to meet some new folks. So glad you're here. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to do some baseline data with all of you, talk a little bit about, I added a section about the fires because I think it's important to know what's going on there. And then I'll try to pivot and we'll talk a little bit about where the Federation's going as a way of thinking about where Jewish life is going. So that's the plan, and then hopefully I'll leave a few minutes for questions and get into a dialogue, okay? So first, just to understand the LA Jewish community. So this is the LA Jewish community here. It is, we like to call it the most diverse and dispersed diaspora in the world. We're the second largest Jewish community in the United States. We're the fourth largest in the world. As you can see, each one of those dots represents 100 Jewish individuals or more. So there's, just give you a total number here, there's about 600,000 Jews that we know of living in the Southland. The number is actually pretty higher because of the proportion that are immigrants that tend not to answer survey questions, et cetera, for all sorts of reasons. We're pretty much dispersed in a couple of areas. It's a little hard to see on this map, but that's the 10 and the 405. That's that with the big blue blob. So it's a mixture between Santa Monica, Brentwood, Palisades, and all the way to Mid-City where the Pico Robertson neighborhood is. And then following up along the 101 corridor, as many of us people are here in the valley, Encino, Sherman Oaks, Encino, Tarzana, West Hills, et cetera, going out to the Conejo Valley. So those are the pretty much the density. You can see how it's all kind of broken out. And what's amazing about our community is that I don't think of LA as a city, I think of LA as a region. I think we have to stop thinking of ourselves simply as one city, even though many of us know that LA is one city, but the city of Santa Monica, is that LA? The city of Beverly Hills, is that LA? The city of Culver City, is that LA? No, but that might not be true from a governmental standpoint, but from a cultural standpoint, we all feel like we're part of LA. So LA is more than just a city in that sense, and that's how we kind of approach it. So we did a series of surveys starting in 2021 and then picking up a lot this past year during the height of the war in Gaza about how engaged folks are. And this is like a really cool chart. So if you take a look, and again, the color's not saturated enough to understand, but in terms of how engaged Jews are here in LA, the answer is Jews engaged with institutions is much lower than in other cities. But Jews engaged in Jewish life is actually pretty high. So only about 3% are very engaged, and very engaged probably means something like you go to synagogue, you belong to an organization, you donate to those organizations, you participate in active Jewish life. Somewhat engaged means you do some of those things. Not very engaged means you do those things very occasionally, and not at all means that you don't do them at all. So this was a national survey. The data is different than our data. Our data shows that actually when you begin to remove the institutional overlay. So when you think about it this way, like ask yourself the question, what does it mean to be engaged in Jewish life? Does your membership to the temple or to AIPAC or to whatever other organization count as your engagement in Jewish life? If you are a card-carrying member of the Reform movement or the Orthodox movement or the conservative movement or what have you, does that count as your engagement with Jewish life? So historically, that was how we measured who is involved in Jewish life. And we flipped that entirely on its head and said, you don't count people's engagement in Jewish life based on affiliation, on membership. You actually count it by what they do. So we took 50 different markers of Jewish life, from lighting Shabbat candles to listening to something, a podcast or reading a newspaper, to doing Shabbat dinner, to speaking about Israel or Jewish topics or what have you. We just took a bunch of these markers and asked individuals, do they do Jewish? Not if they are Jewish. And what we found very quickly was that in Los Angeles, 76% of Jews reported in the survey did Jewish on a regular basis, even if for that means once a week or even once a month. But they did something Jewish. Much higher than these numbers, because these numbers show only affiliation. So one of the big concerns that came up during the war, of course, is about safety and anti-Semitism. And I'm happy to share these slides when I'm done. But very quickly, the question was, do you feel safe? Are you experiencing anti-Semitism in LA? And how does that indicate about your Jewish life? So the conclusion that came up from this survey, this was like from March. They did, as you can see, there were several respondents, March, October. On the left-hand column there, you get a chance to see how things stack up. But basically, LA Jews are slightly less likely to indicate that they worry about their safety very much compared to other Jews in other cities, but are still much more concerned than the general public. I mean, just as a straw poll, raise your hands. Have you at all in the past year have ever felt even the slightest amount of concern for your safety because you're Jewish? Has anyone experienced that here? Okay, so the fact that not very many people raise their hands actually comports with the survey, believe it or not. It says in LA, Jews are nearly twice more likely to worry very much about their personal safety than the general public. I mean, just think about it. Think about, like, at this point in my life, if I were to go to a Jewish institution, a Jewish event that didn't have security, I would think, oh, they're underfunding their security apparatus, right? The majority of people in the United States don't even think about security when they walk into a temple or a market or a gala or an event, right? Here, couple of quick notes on anti-Semitism. 77% are concerned about anti-Semitism in the non-Jewish community, which is less. We're actually less concerned, and truth is LA has less anti-Semites than other communities, partially because we're so diverse. I'm going to leave the college campuses aside for a minute. I'm talking about the real people of LA, the people who live in Los Angeles. 18 say they know where to turn, only 18%. Like, this is interesting, right? If you were concerned for anti-Semitism or your personal safety because you're Jewish, less than 1 out of 5 of us would know where to turn for that. That's huge for me. That's a major initiative we're starting to work on. Only 55% feel most in the non-Jewish community would not stand with their Jewish community in the event of a major anti-Semitic threats and violence. I think we saw that at the height of the war, where we were experiencing many anti-Semitic events here in Los Angeles, and we were wondering, where are all the people who said they were our allies? Where did they go? And then this one is surprising to me because it's not at all my experience here in LA, but only 27% feel local law enforcement take anti-Semitism seriously. I actually don't think that's true. I think that we just don't have enough cops in this city to do anything about anything. So I don't think it's just about that. Last slide on security, then we'll get to broader stuff. So, not surprisingly, 98% of the respondents say they feel more secure when there's a visible security presence, like a guard or what have you. 34 feel physically safe in school organizations and spaces. I just understand that what a low number that is. I don't know why, but that was what came back, as opposed to 76% nationwide. 39% feel Jewish organizations are effectively providing safety and security, which is so interesting. I mean, Valley Beth Shalom is a very secure institution, but only a fourth or a third of folks feel that their Jewish institutions are adequately secured, and only 35% are aware of specific community security programs like our Community Security Initiative. So there's a whole market gap here of information that we are trying to work on to have folks in the Jewish community understand about Jewish life, because this data just is very startling. Simultaneously, and now going back to this chart, I don't know if you can see, but people have their hands raised. This is what we call the surge. So since 10/7, we have seen both a radical rise in anti-Semitism and people feeling isolated and alone, and at the same time a radical rise in Jews who want to be more engaged Jewishly. So if you kind of look, the majority of the surge is happening in that light brown category, which is called somewhat engaged. People who know about Jewish life, people who might do a little bit Jewish, are doing way more Jewish now. It's not surprising that those who are not very engaged are becoming only somewhat more engaged. And then if you look at the very engaged, becoming very engaged. So you're seeing this just stacking of Jewish engagement. So what does that mean? People showing up to synagogue, people showing up for learning classes, people reaching out, people listening to more Jewish music or podcasts or reading Jewish publications. Maybe they're wearing clothing that is a little bit more overtly Jewish, like a yellow ribbon or a kippah or a dog tag or something else like that, right? We're seeing a shift into Jewish life simultaneously, which is just kind of a fascinating thing. And to think about that, and maybe it's not at all surprising that it takes a catastrophe for us to really realize what value Jewish life has, right? That negative presupposition. I want to shift now briefly because we're just laying out data. This is a preliminary report. It's not even public yet, but I want to show you, because you're Valley Beth Shalom, my community, about what we've been able to track so far from the fires. Because all of this is important about talking about where Jewish life is going, because to understand what this fire, especially the Palisades fire, meant to the Jewish community is on the level of what Hurricane Katrina meant to the community in Biloxi and Gulfport. Okay, massive. So I just want to show you. First is a quick map of the fire. The red is the Palisades fire. Okay, at that night, the red, it looks brown, I guess, on the map, but that is the burn map. Okay, the red on the map is the size of the fire. The red on the map is the size of the Palisades fire. And it is mapped against the map of New York City and the map of London. This is right out of the BBC. So the idea here, if you can see, 24,000 acres were burned. And if you were to see, it's basically as if New York City lost all of Queens, right? Or 3 times the size of Manhattan. All the fires together, the Eden fire, the Kenneth fire, the Palisades fire, the Woodley fire, the Olivia fire, there was 8 fires at one point burning simultaneously. The Hearst fire, they burned 63 square miles. So Washington, D.C., the District of Washington, D.C. is 60 square miles. The San Francisco portion of the Bay Area, just downtown San Francisco, is 49 square miles. I'll give you a chance to see just how big this fire is. Now, what makes this fire also not just an Angelino event but a Jewish event, is that the Palisades fire, the mountains, the Santa Monica Mountains, are completely surrounded, if you remember this chart, completely surrounded by the Jewish community. So we cross-referenced our data from the study of Jewish LA with the data of the evacuees in the zip codes affected by the Palisades fire. This is what we figured out. 52,700 Jewish households affected, meaning approximately 118,000 Jews or 146,500 people living in Jewish households. It's a big number, Roz. That's much bigger than most Jewish communities in the United States. In terms of the impact on our infrastructure as a Jewish community, we lost between the fires 4 synagogues and schools were damaged or destroyed, including Gilad Israel and Palisades is damaged but not destroyed, but it needs a ton of remediation before it can be. The structure wasn't damaged, but there are toxins. You have to replace the carpeting. You basically have to strip the paint and repaint it. The Chabad in the Palisades lost its outbuildings and its preschool building. Of course, this is the photograph I took when I visited the Pasadena Jewish Temple and Center, which no longer exists, and that's the Yortzeit plaque. That's all that's left of the shul. And they also had a preschool on that campus there that burned down. All of our schools closed. I mean, we have 44 preschools and 33 day schools and yeshivas in the city. They all closed during the height of the fire, and 4 day schools delayed reopening by over a week or more. 6 preschools delayed over a week or more. We count that as damage because we lost a week of learning. You've lost a week of education, and to us that's considered infrastructure damage in Jewish life. So, and then I'll just say on the preschool front, the ones that have reopened, including here, we've had to, and the Federation has helped remediate the property essentially by replacing all the sand in the sandboxes. If a single piece of toxic ash lands in a sandbox where preschoolers play, you have to replace the whole thing because they'll put it in their mouth, right? Even after rain, right? So that's hundreds of tons of remediation have had to happen in the last week and a half. This is what we know about the Palisades fire. We ran a survey of synagogues affected that overlapped with zip codes of people catchment area. We know so far that 444 families lost homes. 451 additional families lost, homes are damaged enough they cannot return to them, and over 47 families lost businesses. Right? So this is what we know so far. It's over about 1,000 homes and over 50 businesses. We think that number is going to continue to rise. That's why it's a preliminary report. The numbers will keep changing. This is as of last week. And just as a reminder, if you're not connected to the Jewish community in any way, and no one's able to reach out to you to understand if you lost your home and you're Jewish, we don't have a way of capturing that data right now. We just don't have that vehicle. So these numbers are probably much higher, but that's what we're able to understand. In the San Gabriel Valley, we know that 66 families lost homes. It's a much less Jewishly engaged area, but that's still significant to them because there's only about 5,000 Jews in that area, and if 66 lost homes, multiply that by approximately 4, right, gives you a understanding of how many people lost their homes. And then our work since the fire, I think some of you have been watching this, is emergency assistance, case management, navigation to federal and local resources, and short-term mental health counseling through a program we call the Ezra Network. We have institutional partnerships. We released hundreds of thousands of dollars to rabbis' discretionary funds for them to give out to congregants who were affected. We have a pop-up camp that we're running at a camp called Camp Bob Waldorf, which is in the Altadena area for families affected by fires, so they can come and play and enjoy. We know this after terrorist attacks. We know this after other fires, after the Woolsey fire, the Franklin fire. Running pop-up camps is a really great way for families to snap back and try to find a semblance of life again. We partnered with the BJE and all the preschools and day schools across the city to collect data and to, again, like we said about the sand. And there's a wonderful organization called OBKLA, Our Big Kitchen Los Angeles. We are funding them so that they can get out tens of thousands of meals to evacuees and to first responders. And then that's me at the command center with the chief, the CAL FIRE chief. And we are the primary Jewish organization that interfaces with the government. We've made tens of thousands of phone calls. We have a new text system that ran. So I don't know if you get if your mobile number is in our system, you probably got that text from us, which helps navigate you to resources in real time if you needed it, and launching a number of other communications tools. Our resource guide, by the way, just so you understand, is on our website. It's a resource guide. It's where the funding is. So if you want to donate, you can donate there. But the resource guide is really for people also who are affected by the fires. It has been viewed and downloaded over 30,000 times since the fire began. Again, we have a sister federation in the San Gabriel Valley, so we went and visited them and are partnering with them on all this work. And so that's kind of where the fires were. So what do we learn from all of this? I know I just threw a whole bunch of data. So here's the big picture. Bottom line. Jews in LA are very engaged in Jewish life, but not in Jewish institutions. We're very diverse. We have the largest diaspora of Israeli American Jews. We have the largest diaspora of Persian, Iranian American Jews. We have the largest diaspora of Russian and Ukrainian speaking Jewish community in the world live here in Los Angeles. That's in addition to all us regular old Ashkenazi Jews that moved here years and years and years ago. Okay, we have a rising number of Jews of color. Those are Jews who were probably brought into the community through various means over the last 50 years, through adoption, conversion, etc., that consider themselves a person of color, an African American, a Latino, Asian American, Korean American, Native American, etc. About 8% of our community is that, which is crazy when you think about it. It's amazing. It's amazing that people are being attracted to Jewish life. We see a rise in Jewish engagement in terms of Jewish practice, and I don't mean necessarily talis and tefillin and keeping kosher. I mean engaging with Jewish content, engaging with Jewish topics, participating in Jewish learning groups, but we still have a diminished amount of people who are belonging to institutions. The surge is helping that number a little bit, but it's still too early to know. So the average affiliation rate in this city is about 20%, which is about 10 to 15% lower than other major cities' Jewish life. We also know that that was the first part. The second part is rise of antisemitism systemically across our entire community. Even though we don't always experience it in our daily lives, we're seeing it on campus especially. We saw it in the media. We're seeing it in political spaces. And that's actually showing up a little bit after the fires, where they're talking about the fires as a rich man's fire and a poor man's fire. And by the rich man's fire, they're using Jewish dog whistles to talk about the Jewish fire and the non-Jewish fire. So we're fighting against that. We're working on that. I'm not here to make you hate the people who are trying to help, because they are trying to help. They're blind. It's just a matter of ignorance, not a matter of malice. Rise of anti-Semitism, all of those things. So that is all the data that's out there, okay? To give you a chance to understand what a crazy, amazing, vibrant, diverse, spread out Jewish community is at Los Angeles. But because of that, we have the opportunity to be also the most innovative. Because, like everything else in Hollywood, you're only as good as your last script. Which means you got to continue, push towards the new, push towards what's exciting, and use that moment to do it. So I want to tell you a story about that, and then we're going to get into Q&A in just a minute. Anyone recognize who that gentleman is in the middle? That is FDR. This is a photo of him at the White House meeting polio survivors. Why is he meeting polio survivors? Because he was a survivor of polio. That's right. So he's there to meet with them, to give them hope, to show them that, there's life after polio, they're all in their wheelchairs or crutches or what have you, right? Well, In FDR's time, polio was a very, very, very common disease that had infected thousands and thousands and thousands of children. People died. The iron lung was created to deal with polio, and as a result, it was thought as a fact of life until this man came along. Anyone know who that is? Jonas Salk, that's right. Who decided that what was important for him in dealing with this disease was to invent an entirely new process of how to fight disease. And what did he do? He created a vaccine, right? One of the first major vaccines in the world, the polio vaccine, through trial and error, he actually administered it to himself and his family first, which the FDA will not allow you to do that today. It's before regulation. But what made Salk amazing was that he decided that he was going to, instead of fighting polio by building new machines or building new wheelchair factories, he was going to create a vaccine. To me, that is where we need to go. This is our first building as a federation. In Boyle Heights. Unfortunately, it's where the 110 and the 101 meet in Boyle Heights, okay? So it's not there anymore. It's now a parking lot for Caltrans. But it was founded as a home for Jewish widows and orphans. It was founded to deal with the outcomes of poverty, of antisemitism, of pain, of all the things that make us sad, right? So essentially, we were a wheelchair factory. And in many ways, the programs of Federation and the programs of Jewish life have been built as wheelchair factories. How many of you have ever served in a food bank? How many of you have ever done a feeding program for the homeless? How many of you have ever tried to raise money for the Jewish National Fund to build trees in Israel, right? How many of you have been asked to support building a building here or doing a thing there, right? Many of that is what I would call wheelchair factories. Very important work, but downstream from the problems itself. And where we need to go, I believe, as a community, is to start not only keep funding those wheelchair factories, but become like Jonas Salk and build vaccines. And so we do that by not just investing in things, but investing in people. By investing in people, and we're very good at that. So the first thing that's coming to LA, which we've already started working on, is a project we call Hubs and Pathways. Hubs and Pathways is a way to bring Jewish life to non-affiliated but Jewishly engaged folks across the city through building hubs, and then by building new pathways, by investing in people. We're doing that in Venice Beach at our new facility that's on Venice Beach called the Bar Center. We're doing that here in the Valley. We're starting to build towards building a full hub here in the Valley. Not sure where it's going to be, because what's more important than a physical space are people. And we're now working with San Gabriel Valley to do the same thing. So by investing in people, you can bring Jewish life to them. The second is we're reimagining fundraising through people-to-people fundraising, more than institutional fundraising or professional fundraising, not important for this group. One of the things that's really important, though, is that we need to put the right people in the right seats at the right time in the political sphere. And so in 2025, we're launching a new agency here in LA that's called a 501c4, which is a political machine. There is no way right now that we can fight anti-Semitism simply by going to a PTA meeting and telling them they're anti-Semitic. There's no way that we can fight anti-Semitism by going to city council and giving public comment. Because the people on the other side, the school board, the city council, the county supervisors, the community college board, the state assembly, all of those folks, if they're not willing to listen to us, then we're just protesting for the sake of protesting, and we're not actually going to make a change. What a 501c4 does, which the Federation cannot currently do, is that it can give people the education of which candidates running for office are aligned with our Jewish values. And we will encourage those individuals to use their money and their time to push for those candidates to be elected. And then if that candidate is elected to the school board, we will go and have a meeting. And we will bring along the people who funded his campaign, that learned about why funding his campaign is important from us, to have a meeting about anti-Semitism. And you know the old story, the old saying about money talks. This is a machine that we are building to build a new skill. It's a vaccine to try to push anti-Semitism into the darkest corners and away from the limelight like it's been this past year. We're working now at the 6 colleges around the Southland. We're organizing the faculty. You all remember those protests last April, right? The encampments right around Passover, right? How horrible was that? Well, okay, I can yell and scream at a 17, 18-year-old girl who's wearing a keffiyeh and tell her that she's being anti-Semitic. Where do you think she's learning it from? No, I don't think she's learning it from her parents. I think she's learning it from the faculty. So we need to organize Jewish faculty on campuses to fight for Jewish life, because the students come and go. A undergraduate college campus flips over every 2.5 years. You come in, you're a freshman, you have no idea what you're doing, right? You're a sophomore, literally you're a sophomoric, you think you know everything, but you don't know anything. You're a junior, you're at the height of your college career, and by the time you're halfway through your senior year, you're looking for internships and jobs, and you're leaving. But who has been there the whole time? The history professor, the Middle East studies professor, the women's studies professor, the engineering professor, and they'll be there year after year after year. If we don't start paying attention to the faculty, we'll never be able to systemically fight anti-Semitism on campus. So we're launching at Occidental, at UCLA, Claremont Colleges, USC, and CSUN, a faculty network to support Jewish and Zionist-aligned faculty on campus. And lastly, we got a major gift from the Karsh family. Jackie is a journalist, an Emmy-nominated journalist, and we're not going to fight hate on TikTok. It's just not possible. It's too big, it's too broad, it's too content, but we're going to focus on people. So we're launching this year the Karsh Journalism Fellowship, which will invest in emerging journalists who are Jewish and Zionist-aligned and get them to become more influential in their industry. Because the truth is, President Trump aside, most decision makers in the political world make their decisions not from TikTok, but by reading the Wall Street Journal or The Economist or the Washington Post or what have you, right? We need the right people in that space at the right time. So we're going to grow a national cohort, which we're launching this year, to invest in young Jewish journalists, and some of the most famous Jewish journalists that you've all read have agreed to sit on our advisory committee. So the idea is to have the most seasoned journalists in the Jewish, not in the Jewish world. We're looking for those whose bylines are not the Jewish Journal, but the Wall Street Journal, to mentor young emerging journalists. We're working on that. So that's where we're going. That's where Jewish life is going, okay? Jewish life here in LA is going to continue to be very innovative, very creative, in many ways continuing to diversify from the Ashkenazi experience to incorporate Sephardic, Mizrahi, Iranian, etc. experiences, much more sort of pop-up type of events, much more less affiliated with synagogues, not because synagogue affiliation is bad, but because that's not where actually the mass majority of our Jews are. If I said that only 20% belong to synagogues, then what about the other 80% of the Jewish community? And then trying to create a network of organizations that work together to push forward against systemic problems in the Jewish world. We're trying to find systemic solutions. Less wheelchair factories, more vaccines. So that's where we're going. That's where Jewish life is going. I'm happy to entertain any kind of questions that you might have. Let's get into it. Just Joel's going to walk around with the mic.
We need the mic so that folks on YouTube can hear the questions. So I'm going to walk around to those who raise their hands.
Would you talk for a second about the campus program? I think you said you were speaking with just Jewish professors?
No, we say Jewish, and I call it Jewish and Zionist aligned. So those who are our allies. And the idea is that there's already students for justice in Palestine. They're starting to create faculty for justice in Palestine. There is no version of that in the Jewish world. So we're going to create a version of that so that Jewish professors on campus have a place to discuss with each other, to network with each other, and to push the administration to adhere to the appropriate policies that keeps anti-Semitism off campus. That's what we're working on.
So I heard there's a challenge to institutions, Jewish institutions.
Yeah.
If most Jews, at least in our area, are not affiliated, how are Jewish institutions failing to attract them, and what should institutions be doing differently to change that paradigm?
Kind of a loaded question, since Joel, you and I sat on this committee at the strategic plan here for VBS many years ago. Listen, a synagogue has to do two things simultaneously. I'll just talk about synagogues because I know it very well. You have to both be a broadcaster of content, that is to say, Torah study, sermons, right? You're creating Jewish life. That was the only model for a very long time. And now you have to switch from not just doing that, but also becoming a platform to allow Jews to express themselves on your platform. And we've talked about this before. So that means that, number one, you have to create opportunities that are very low bar for folks to experiment open-endedly, like a sandbox, with their Jewish life. And I think you're doing some of that here now. Number two, you're only going to attract people to your congregation who look like the people that are already there, sound like the people that are already there, and have value sets of the people that are already there. And you have to make a decision. Is that who we are? That is to say, explicitly this, explicitly this, explicitly this? Or are we willing to try to attract more diverse groups, given what you know about the data, that Ashkenazi normative Jews are now moving into the minority in Los Angeles? Are you going to create programs where non-Ashkenazi, non-white, less affiliated Jews can see themselves? All it takes is for one black Jewish family to show up and to see there are no other black Jews here, for them to say, okay, I guess that's not really a place for us. So you have to become explicit and intentional in creating those opportunities. And then lastly, you have to use technology to reach out to people who won't drive here. It's too hard to get here. Or use some other abilities where you bring Judaism to them as much as you're expecting them to bring their Jewish life to you. If you do those things, that's your best shot.
So can you expand a little bit on this concept of the hub? How is that different? How is that not creating just another Jewish institution?
Great.
How does that operate?
So H-Hub is going to be an experiment because we don't know the answer yet. Our hub in Venice focuses on 3 areas currently. Frail seniors have a feeding program, and these are mostly very poor seniors who has a feeding program and an exercise program 5 days a week. That's funded by the county. That's part of our mandate, is to help people who are living at the margins, so that's the first thing. The second one is a teen program that we're working in partnership with the Jewish Agency for Israel, a subset called Route 1. They have an emissary called a Shaliach living in that building because we have an apartment there, and they are helping teens who are not in the normative Jewish channels. That is to say, they're not in youth group, they're not in day school, they're not in Jewish high school, discover their Jewish life and love of Israel. And then the third is young adults. That's that long period between the end of college and the beginning of enrolling your own kid into a preschool. Well, so we run just almost every week a Shabbat dinner on the beach at that program, at that building, to try to bring people in. So those are the three major programs we're running. And then a fourth one we're considering for 26 is a program for active adults, book series and stuff. It's such a beautiful facility right on the beach. We think we can utilize it for more, but we can't do it all at once. The hub experiment here in the Valley is going to be for active adults. And we're thinking of building what's called a maker space, which is a place for you to practice hobbies and crafts of various different parts as a drop-in, come and go, whether it's wood shop or 3D printing or knitting or what have you, and to experience Jewish life that way. There's no membership required. It's a fee for service for those kinds of things. And then we're pairing that with our J-Babies programs and other programs. Again, these are for Jews that are meant who live on the periphery of Jewish life.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions pertaining to Elon Musk and how Mr. Greenblatt from the ADL responded. We did not watch the story a week ago. This isn't about political, but we happened to watch part of the rally. And when Mr. Musk came out and clearly made the Hitler, the Nazi salute, my husband and I could not believe it. Yeah. So you come here, and I agree, you're trying to fight anti-Semitism. You even talk about professors in the campus. And so when we heard that from the ADL, as a Jew, first of all, I don't need permission from him to tell me what I saw, or what we saw. Secondly, we were shocked, to be quite honest with you, because Elon Musk has very much in the past, with X, has made a lot of statements that are very anti-Semitic, and he even went as far as saying this weekend that Germany needs to get over its guilt over the Holocaust. Then we also heard that Prime Minister Netanyahu defended Musk. So we're not feeling really good about how we're fighting anti-Semitism when we're hearing voices that are actually defending someone who is clearly very, very anti-Semitic. And I'm wondering if you could address that for us.
I can address it a little bit. Thanks. First of all, it's not our job as a federation to do the EDL's job, right? We're a charity. We're a humanitarian charity. And the areas of fighting anti-Semitism we've chosen, we think have the broadest consensus and can work on the systems, as opposed to a single, individual who's the wealthiest man in the world. Like, that's not our lane. That's the ADL's lane. That's the first thing I want to say. And so my opinion comes more from my perspective than it does from Federation's perspective. Secondly, I always thought that the ADL's credibility was its ability to call balls and strikes on anti-Semitism, and I think that it probably capitulated to some of its sort of right-wing donors or what have you in this moment. Because I just want to be clear. It doesn't matter if Elon Musk is an anti-Semite or what he did was explicitly anti-Semitic. What matters is how Jews take it. It doesn't matter if a man says something that he thinks is fine and a woman feels is sexual harassment. What matters is if the woman experiences that message as sexual harassment. Do you see what I'm doing? I'm shifting the definition, not from the act or the person, but to how it is experienced. So I don't run the ADL. I certainly probably wouldn't have tweeted what they tweeted. It didn't matter. Well, basically they said, we don't know what happened. It was kind of a mealy mouth kind of a thing. But at the very least, whether or not Elon Musk intended it anti-Semitically, whether or not he was doing something explicitly in his mind that he thought was anti-Semitic, it doesn't matter. What matters is that at least half the Jewish community took it that way. So I would say to the people at ADL, you could have written your tweet or whatever in a way that at least embraces the experience of those who experienced it as anti-Semitic and called it for what that is, that experience of anti-Semitism. What bothers me the most out of all of this, and that does bother, what bothers me the most out of all of this is that we've gotten to a place where something like that happens and we as a Jewish community fight with each other as opposed to fighting against the source of the anti-Semitism. We fight with each other. We get into a debate. Was that anti-Semitic? We get into some kind of taxonomy. Was that anti-Semitic? Is that anti-Semitic? Is it not anti-Semitic? Does he like the Jews? Does he not like the Jews? He cares about the hostages. He used to wear like one of those dog tag things, but now he does this thing. Like, so much analyzing as opposed to, and then using that as a cudgel against each other as if there aren't enough of us in the world to do that, as opposed to be thinking about what are the systems that are in place, what are the things that are being done that are specifically anti-Semitic. So the Jew-on-Jew part of this, and I don't need to defend or attack Elon Musk. What I see is that a large percentage of the Jewish community, not an insignificant number of Jews, experience that as anti-Semitic, and that's what I care about, are Jews. I don't really care about Elon Musk, I care about Jews. So that's yeah.
I'd like to focus on public health because I'm very much concerned about
Sure.
what direction we're going in this country. We've had a pretty good system these last 50 years, and you acknowledged that with Jonas Salk. Now we have a federal government that is trying to impose restrictions on communication about possible pandemics that are coming our way. The programming that you're describing now, do you
Yeah.
have any focus on that? I spoke to a man in our Havara yesterday who was a physician and asked him whether he was a member of the AMA, and he sort of discounted.
So I'm not the biologist. I'm not I am a bit of a community person, right? Our area that we focus on this, which is not an area that we don't do the research, we don't literally produce vaccines. We produce social workers who can help navigate people who are sick or infirm or poor to the right services. So what I'm nervous about, and I think what we should all be nervous about, regardless of who's in the White House, is using public health dollars to punish poor people and punish those who are needing of those for some other political agenda, which is never entirely clear. So I'm nervous about that. I'm nervous that if this administration begins to cut the social safety net significantly, including possibly Social Security and other things, because they feel like this is their one shot, what's that's going to do to the frail, the poor, the elderly, the infirm in our community, which is our responsibility.
There is a community that wants to support a Catholic charter school. The big question is whether we're going to continue to have separation of church and state. Now, if they approve that, what do you think the effect's going to be on Jewish education?
Yeah, it's a good question. There already is a Hebrew charter school here in Van Nuys, and probably don't know that, but it does exist, called Lashon Academy. The views on church and state in this country have shifted dramatically since I was a kid. Let's be really honest about that. The Supreme Court has shifted dramatically. The idea being that it used to be that church and state had to be so far separate that nothing that even smacked of religious values would ever be funded in any way by the government. Now, what they're showing, the new framework around church and state, is that no impediment to your life should be impeded by the government. That is to say, if you want a religious exemption from vaccines, you can get it, or you can keep it out of your health insurance plan if you're a private employer. You can refuse service to any individual because you have a religious feeling that you don't want to serve that individual. And this is the shift in church-state doctrine that has emerged in the last 10 years here in America. When it comes to education, that shift both hurts and helps the Jewish community. It hurts the Jewish community because we are a minority and we're worried that things like reproductive rights, which our version of reproductive rights is very different than the Catholic doctrine, when the Catholic doctrine becomes law, and even though they don't say it's a Catholic doctrine, that harms our version of religious rights in America because our version of reproductive rights is very different than the Christian majority. It helps the Jewish community because what that does is it opens the door for state funding into our Jewish day schools for secular education, for STEM, for math, for security, for nutrition, etc. It used to be that you can't, and it's still the case today, that LAUSD won't serve kosher certified meals in its school unless the parents of that school put together all the logistics themselves and take care of it themselves. That's changing now. That's changing, I think, for the better, because the way how church-state doctrine has shifted, that now they see that there are actually barring religious kids, Jewish kids, from being and having a least restrictive environment in their public school when all they offer is ham and cheese sandwiches for the school lunch and breakfast program. So the new doctrine helps Jewish kids in certain ways, but can harm us in other ways. And we just have to adjust to that reality and try to, frankly, take advantage of the places where we can take advantage of.
Rabbi Farkas,
Yep.
thank you so much for
Thank
joining
you.
us again this year. Really appreciate it. I think we could probably talk for another hour.
No, probably. It's
Thanks
good to
so
see you.
much.
Thank you for having me. It's always good to come home to Valley Beth Shalom. Thank you, everyone.